With geopolitics, as I've explained, it is a really difficult game to try and understand the probabilities and what you should do. The first thing to do when it comes to geopolitics is to do nothing, is to watch, absorb, and try and understand what the playing field is here, what the ramifications are. Now, I must admit, I didn't think that we'd get this far this fast in terms of Russia's actions within Ukraine. So I've been slightly back-footed, but I've already been expecting a global slowdown in the economy. And so I've been starting to position that way by buying bonds, some gold, some dollars, that kind of stuff. But let me talk about what I'm seeing now, how I'm thinking through this current event, and then some of the ramifications. Now, this is geopolitics. We have no real clue how this will play out. That's why it's so hard. Economic events are much more forecastable. Geopolitical events have many more different nuances, and you have to use that kind of decision tree structure to assess probabilities of all of the things that could happen and trying to figure out, okay, how do I protect myself? Can I make money out of this? What does this all mean for the much bigger picture? So there's a lot here. There are, as ever, in geopolitical disputes, two sides of a story. And when you're trying to analyze geopolitics, you need to be aware of both. So then you can understand what is propaganda, who you're being told by what person, for whatever reason. And in this situation, we know Russia's been very clear on its intentions to buffer its borders. Peter Zeihan's piece the other day made it very clear. I think D. Smith's gone through this, and most of the geopolitical strategists we've had on Real Vision have also looked at this. So Russia's been very keen on stopping NATO encroaching on its borders. NATO, on the other hand, is very keen on not letting Russia encroach on its borders, but it's been moving NATO's way. And this whole game has been played out for some period of time. I've written this up in GMI and written it up in Macro Insiders, or Real Vision Pro Macro, is this whole situation that we saw started with Chechnya, then moved to Crimea. This Ukraine story was the Crimea story. Then it's these splintering states, then it's Ukraine itself. It's been a story that the Russians have had an obsession with in how they want to deal with it for their own sovereign protection. And I don't want to go into the geopolitics of who said what to whom and why. That's not relevant right now. What's relevant is trying to figure out where we are. So I think we have a very narrow window, maybe 2 weeks, maybe less, which is that the Russians have surrounded Kiev pretty much. Now, we understand that the supply chains are not good, but we also understand the Russians have done this a lot of times before with bad supply chains. It's pretty common, and sheer brute force is how they do it. So they're surrounding Kiev now, and what happens in the next few days or couple of weeks is vital. Let's assume that they can agree a ceasefire, agree some sort of splitting up of Ukraine. So they allow the splinter states. Then maybe they say, well, the government can move and have its own Ukraine, but over towards the west side. And the Russians put a new government in eastern Ukraine. They have West Ukraine, East Ukraine. Something of that sort kind of solves a lot of the problems, although obviously it's still not a good situation. And we'll come on to the big picture still later. But that could see a de-escalation. If we can find some variation around that, where the Ukrainians themselves get some sovereignty, they may lose some sovereignty, or they keep sovereignty of the whole country, but a puppet government gets put in, and the splinter states go to Russia, in which case they're kind of surrounding Ukraine anyway with Crimea as well. That, to me, is something where sanctions get not dropped, but eased off over a period of time, because everybody feels like that they've negotiated a settlement and therefore Russia can be rewarded with something. That's the best possible case scenario that I see right now. It's not my highest probability case either. Case number 2 is that the Ukrainians don't negotiate, don't surrender, and the Russians level Kiev, which I think is the highest probability case. Again, I find it really tough to assess the probabilities, but in my mind, that's what I think the most likelihood is. Then the Russians say they've got 2 choices. One is to keep Ukraine as Ukraine, or the other thing they've been threatening is take away its sovereignty, which is Russia takes over Ukraine. They either put in a puppet government, it might be too late for that now, or they take it over. Okay, that is a bad situation, a really bad situation, because clearly sanctions are not going away. NATO is going to amass weapons and defenses on the borders. Tensions are going to be extremely high, and the food crisis is going to be writ large. So in scenario A, the food crisis still happens. We still go into a global recession. I think that's almost a certainty now. Countries who are trying to get access to dollars, banks trying to get access to dollars, or whether it's credit spreads widening as people pull back, trying to assess the risks that are going on. And we don't really know. I mean, how does this affect Egypt? How does this affect the Middle East at large? How does it affect all sorts of countries? Again, we don't really know yet. But that's a hugely concerning moment, and that's a big global recession if that takes place, and a massive monumental geopolitical shift as the world really is forced to separate out. China starts separating out. And again, we'll come to a bit more of that in a sec. Scenario 3 is the worst case, which is, I think that Russia has made it clear that if you oversupply Poland with weaponry to give to Ukraine, then they're going to consider Poland as part of the war. This is Peter Zayan's point about a potential invasion of Poland. I put that at a low probability, but what the hell do I know? If that is the case, then okay, this is now the worst case situation, because this is NATO versus Russia in a full war. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying these words, but that's where we are, and it's kind of shocking and terrifying. So it's kind of on tenterhooks. The next 2 to 3 weeks, we will find out whether we have scenario 1, scenario 2, and then after that would be, will scenario 3 come into play? So those are the 3 main things. So what are the ramifications? The ramifications is something I've been talking about, and Dee Smith made an incredible 5-part documentary on Real Vision called A World on the Brink. And if you haven't watched it, you absolutely should watch it. It's forecast all of this, and that was made back in, I don't know, 2015. The world is splitting. I think everybody is aware of that. Deglobalization writ large everywhere, and everyone's going to have to go to localized supply chains. And so that means the US, Canada, Mexico will become more interdependent. I hear that the US is making moves towards Venezuela to see if there's anything that could be solvable there. The US needs another footing over in the east, and obviously Iran with its oil supply is a very important place and always has been in the world. Anybody who wants to understand that, read a book called The New Silk Roads, which gives you, Peter Frankopan's book, Silk Road, gives you a whole understanding of why that region is so important, particularly Iran itself. So I understand why they're doing that, because it kind of neutralizes some of the situation and some of the supply shortages going on. The other issue in the geopolitics is everybody has now learnt that the dollar is a liability and not an asset. So i.e. dollars can get taken away from you at will. So even though it looked like a very smart move to weaponize reserves and the financial system, what is actually happening is you are now forcing the de-dollarization of the world. Now, my view on that is that's a slower process. Obviously, Russia just got thrown out, but they've been planning for it. Let's be absolutely clear. Russia's been planning for it. They probably didn't imagine it this fast, this apocalyptical, but the Chinese will be planning it too. The central bank digital currency is part of that planning. So everybody wants to move away from the dollar. And right now, the instant thing that any central bank can do is own more gold. So I think this is a very bullish gold environment for central banks, because that's what they do. It's an asset that they're comfortable with. So I think that is, again, a shift that's going to take people's mindsets. Obviously, all of these trends are very bullish for Bitcoin particularly, but the crypto world overall over time. Now, crypto trades both as a risk asset and a store of value. The store of value element is becoming predominant right now and very clear. The risk aspect, well, it's a bloody risky world out there, so let's wait and see. China, how that plays out in all of this, we don't know, but China's been moving towards separating. And I can't yet think of all of the ramifications, as we are already splitting these worlds apart. If this gets accelerated, what does that do?